It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is H.M. Gooden. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you. And so I have primed myself a little bit more than usual by reading some of your press kit, but tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and the sort of stuff you write.
Okay, well, I've been writing for a few years now, and I published my first book in October of 2017. I write mostly young adult, paranormal, and fantasy, although I have been unable to let a few of my characters go, so they've gotten a little bit older and just become sort of new adults or into adults even. I love drawing on mythology and history for a lot of the background to my stories, and I really like to focus on the relationships between people. So most of my books aren't necessarily about, saving the world by yourself, but more about having a solid group of friends that you can count on and work with to save the world with magic, because everybody likes magic.
Oh yeah. No, that sounds like fun. And so what's your most recent release then?
So my recent release, well, I've had a couple of releases in the last few months that are part of anthologies. So I guess the most recent would be for St. Patrick's Day. I was in an anthology called Mischief and Clovers, and I wrote 2 short stories about St. Patrick's Day related things. So one was a leprechaun story, and it was an apprentice leprechaun, which was a lot of fun. And then the other one is a short story that follows a few of my characters from some of my other books.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds, so as far as your writing goes, do you have a particular style of writing, or not style, but do you have a way that you get onto the page, more about how you actually the process, that kind of thing?
So how do I get started?
Yeah, how do you get started in any given writing session, for example?
So because my life is a little bit hectic in terms of scheduling, most of my writing in the last year or so has been by dictation. I started that around May of last year. And it's had sort of a good and bad outcome in the sense that I am able to get a lot more writing done because I can do it during my commute, but I still do not have more time to edit. So now I have a backlog of about 8 books to edit.
Oh, that's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah.
I wish.
Yeah. So the one difference between just sitting down and writing versus dictating is I do have to plot a little bit more. I used to be straight up pantser, so I would just sit down and go with an idea. But now I will... I'll kind of write a 1 or 2 page summary of what I think the story is going to be about, and then break it into a sentence or 2 per chapter. But it still ends up veering off course fairly frequently. So it's more just so that I don't have to look at anything while I'm driving.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. I recently I've been trying with my own work to not plan as much as I used to, because I've always identified pretty much, or the last few years, I've really identified as a discovery writer, not a plotter. And yet I have this instinct to plot because I did that for a while in the middle of my writing time, my time as a writer. And by a while, I mean a few years, and it was a mistake at the time, I think. And it was almost, but it made me more comfortable with writing particular scenes and stories.
So more with the mechanics.
Yeah, it made me, exactly. It helped me learn structure. And now I'm like, well, I really don't, kind of wish I hadn't done that now, I kind of wish I was writing more freely.
Yeah, well, and I definitely, when I do the outline, like I said, it isn't a rigid thing. There's been many times where something completely different happens. I do find though that when I kind of do that general like 1-page plot, like, okay, then they're going to do this and then at the end, this is going to happen. I do find I usually still end up at the same place, but the actual path there is often completely unexpected. Kind of like life, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's been my experience when I did plot. And it's just kind of, it's like, especially because knowing the ending is so helpful. Knowing the idea of what the ending is going to be like, even if you don't really know how you're going to get there, is pretty useful. And I've identified that as being helpful for me most of the time.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we do for so many things. Like when you have a goal in life, you're like, okay, I want to get here. And then you have to figure out the steps as you go. I mean, some people really, really outline, but as we know, life has a horrible way of making, turning your plans into a bonfire while you're trying to fulfill them. So I don't know many people that actually manage to follow their little life instruction manual to the T.
Yeah. It's a plan that doesn't survive contact with reality, basically.
Exactly. And I think writing is like that too.
Yeah, I agree. And I tend to hair off after things that and in the story that just make me more interested in what I'm doing. And I think that's a really good instinct. I think that's what I think people who are discovery writing especially should do that. And even people who have plotted probably should listen to that gut too, because otherwise you miss stuff, right?
Well, otherwise you end up with a flat story.
That too, yes. It's kind of yeah, absolutely. And as far as what you do with a story, do you find that you've written a bunch of books now, obviously you've dictated a bunch of books. Do you find that a great deal about each book even before you edit it, or do you learn a lot when you go back to edit it? Like
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, the more time you spend with the material, the more you know it. It's like studying. If you read something once, you might remember 2 or 3 things. But if you read something like 30 times, which unfortunately is the process of editing, most of those details are going to be somewhere in your head. So, yeah. Yeah,
no, that makes sense. So, but I mean, before you edit the book, though, and because you said you had a few in your backlog here.
Oh, so many in my backlog.
Yeah, a few. Yeah, 8's a lot. I've had that many. I've had that many before. I pretty much emptied it out recently, though.
Oh no, that is my goal, but it's tough. That whole working thing.
However, I guess my point is that when do you know when you write something? I mean, I know most people say when they write something they don't know if it's good or not even, and I think that's usually true for me. But is that kind of thing similar for you? Do you write, and especially because it's a dictation, you can't even look at it, right? For when you're actually creating the words. Kind of thing.
It's funny because I think it. Definitely it's a different process. And I was really nervous when I started dictating that, I've had some of the beta readers that read my first few books are still along with me, which is awesome. And I know when my first and second book that I had dictated versus the ones that I sat down and sort of just wrote them out the long, more painful way, I had asked this sucks, doesn't it? Right?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, it's way better than anything you've written. And I was like, really? I was like, why would you say that? They're just like, oh, the
characters
is much more
you
realistic.
Cut out for a second there. I just took a guess.
And
the conversation.
Oh, sorry. The conversation. Yeah, because when you're dictating, you're talking. So I don't know if that means I've cut out a lot more of the sort of filler descriptions. When you're talking to somebody, there's a lot of things you don't say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But at the same time, it is such a different process that when you're reading through it, first of all, there's a lot more corrections for editing because even the best dictation program still has some errors, which probably is user dependent. Because of your accent or whatever, but it takes longer to edit. So maybe it's just that it's better because even before I get to the actual editing, I've already edited it 3 times.
That's a good point. So I tried dictation for a little bit. I've never dictated a whole book that way, and that's because I just found that I'm so picky, and maybe this is a good reason to go back to it. Is like I find that it's much rougher when it first comes out. There's all these little problems with it just because they're just little things that are easy to fix, but it's because you dictated it, right? I mean and I'm like, oh, it's so ugly, and I go back and I just get frustrated with that because I'm kind of a perfectionist, and I really need to work through that in my rough draft.
See, I'm not a perfectionist, which probably counts against me.
Oh no, that's what I'm saying.
I'm one of those people that gets to that. All right, I'm done with this book now. Take it or leave it. I don't even care if you hate it. I'm just done. I need to do something different now. So it's definitely good to put stuff down for a while before you just kind of like throw it at the world when you get like that. But at the same time, like I've got some friends and I've read their work and I think it's amazing. And they started it when I started my first book and they still haven't published it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's done, but they've changed it like 7 times.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, at a certain point,
you gotta let it go.
At a certain point, you only make the book different. You don't make it better. You just make it different when you change things.
Yeah, and I just like I keep telling them, just let it go. Like, be done with it. Write something different, or put that away for a year and write something different. But you're making yourself crazy right now.
Yeah, I know. I've met a lot of people who were doing that at various points in my life, and that's one of the reasons I've always been kind of paranoid about staying in a book too long. Yeah, the longest it ever took me to write a book was about a year, but I wrote 2 other books in between writing that book. Yeah, so you put it down in between. Yeah, exactly. And I think that was really cool, and also that book was huge. It was 150,000 words long.
Oh yeah, no, that's 2 books, right?
It became 3 novels eventually, actually, because I expanded.
But there you go. Yeah, so it's big. Most of mine are sort of between that 60 and 70,000. I think the biggest reason why I wouldn't ever probably fit into the sci-fi category is because I don't really like the details. I've always been more of a generalist. So I do put details in, obviously, but all of those little details that a lot of people like, I just skim over those. So I don't tend to put them in my books because I don't read them.
Oh, yeah. I'm a big fan of those details. I know. As I've gotten older, I've grown to love those so much. Yeah. I mean, I like fantasy a lot too, but there's a certain kind of fantasy, epic fantasy, especially, which also does that.
Yeah. And I'm actually writing one of those right now. And so it is a bit of a mind shift for me. I'm doing a co-writing series with J.A. Kulikan right now.
Okay.
And it is epic fantasy, and it is much more structured than anything I've written before. So I did find it was a little difficult to shift gears at the start. And it's in first person, which I've never written before.
Oh, that's interesting. First person epic fantasy. That's pretty fascinating, actually. Not a normal decision.
Right?
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, so it's YA. So most YA tends to be more first person, but I've always liked my third person, omniscient, I know everything sort of thing. It's and the edits I got back for that first book, I was a little crushed because I really identified with the main character, and they just kept saying like, "Oh, your person's really a narcissist."
Oh,
I was like, "Oh, stabbing," and like I kind of was like complaining to somebody else, and they're like, well, that's pretty normal the first time you write this because you're like, and then I did this, and then I did this. And in order to write it well, you have to be the one sort of feeling and reacting, not doing that, I did this. And so I went through those edits and I tried to, pick up my crumbled and bruised feelings. And I definitely can say it's 100 times better now than my first draft. And I'm sure I'm going to get back lots of edits still. So that's why you have editors, right?
Oh, absolutely. And when it comes to that kind of thing, to the editing and the just the level of stuff that changed. I mean, I've been in a few writing groups, some better than others, but and sometimes the feedback can be really unhelpful if it's not specific enough, obviously. But most of the time, really useful. Yeah.
Specific and hurtful, but like not intentionally hurtful. It's not their problem.
Yeah, because they're talking about the character, and it wasn't your fault. It wasn't their fault. You identified so much with the character.
Right. Well, and I think we're all a little tender when it comes to our babies.
That's true. Yeah, that's what made me think about it, actually.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why it is also good advice to put that down before you edit, right? So that you can get a little bit of distance and you can look at it a little more objectively and go, oh yeah, that is that is totally a narcissist. Right?
Yeah, I mean, most of the books that I've actually had any success with recently, I put down for 3 or 4 years before I published them.
Oh wow!
I came back and edited them. Actually, one of them, it was 10 years almost.
Wow.
And that became a 3-book series immediately because I split into novellas. But yeah, the other one was 4 or 5. And because I get so carried away with actually writing new books, or at least I did back in the day.
Yeah.
That no book got published very quickly. And I was actually, it took me a long time to publish, which is one, like the book that took me 10 years to publish took me 10 years because I wasn't publishing until 7 years later, kind of thing. 7 years after I wrote it. Yeah. But anyway, that was a fantasy novel. And you write kind of this urban fantasy for the most part, right? At least a lot of your books look to fit in the paranormal or urban fantasy young adult category.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, like I said, I like magic. I like happy endings. I mostly write from the female perspective because I really like the idea that, some 12 or 13-year-olds going to pick this book up and it's going to tell them that they can do whatever they want. Even if they, don't think they have firepower, they're going to realize that a lot of what is happening in my books isn't about the magic. It is about the relationships and believing in yourself and standing up for yourself. And that's something that everybody can do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think confidence is its own kind of magic in the real world. Yeah.
I mean, how many times do we kind of go through life going, oh, if I could just be more this or more that? Well, why? Why can't you be just that?
Yeah, I mean, that's
what's holding us back is just our confidence.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's kind of my position actually right now. Even though I've written, a bunch of books, and even with writing, I always, at least not always, I've fallen into this spot where I'm very unconfident over the past few years, and it's weird because now I'm actually publishing. I think that's part of the reason I'm not so confident because I've been publishing with limited success.
Yes. Well, and I think part of it too, and I discovered this when I was learning how to speak French. So it is the exact same feeling that I've had over the last year. And I couldn't figure it out. But like you said, it's like this feeling that, everything I'm writing sucks, right? It's just like, I used to think I was good and now I think I suck.
Yeah.
And I realized it is the exact same thing that I had when I was learning French. When you start to learn another language, at first you don't know anything. And then slowly you start to be able to speak that language. And then you have very limited basic skills. And then suddenly you can actually converse and you can have a full conversation, or you can listen to the radio, or you can understand what people that speak that language as a first language are saying. And it makes sense to you. But what you say sounds awful. And it's almost like every time you level up, you get that feeling again that you suck.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it. I mean, with me, I'm not sure if I leveled up, but I guess everyone would say that, right? You don't really know.
So maybe you have leveled up, and that's what's holding you back, is because you don't always notice you've leveled up. Yeah, until you look back and you're like, wait, I thought that sucked. That's actually really good. Because now I think what I'm writing sucks, but that stuff was pretty good.
Right. I mean, that is my experience usually. That's why I like editing so much now, actually.
Exactly.
Because I wrote all these books before I started publishing, and now I'm editing stuff, and I'm like, okay, this actually is pretty cool.
I like this story. Exactly.
Yeah, I like this story. Yeah, I like these characters. This is really fun. And but I do think there's just one other thing I want to touch on about this, though, is that I feel like maybe quality doesn't matter, because I actually have a fair amount of confidence in the actual quality of my writing. And that's what I tell myself now is like, it doesn't really matter how good your writing is, but I don't think that's true either. Really. There's a level there where I think it's kind of, you shouldn't count on your writing doing well just because it's good, but you also shouldn't say that it doesn't matter at all. Right. I mean, it's not that's just kind of demoralizing for me. And it's something I've fallen into saying to myself.
Sorry, you cut out there for a second. I missed that last sentence.
Oh, it's just something it can be demoralizing to tell myself, at least when I tell myself, that my writing quality doesn't matter a great deal. It doesn't matter much, or it's not that important. That doesn't matter. Why am I even editing this? Right. I mean, it's cool. I like reading it, but what am I doing here if the quality doesn't matter? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it does matter, right? Because I can tell you, I have beta for a lot of people, and I've read books that I really like the concept, and I think that the plot is good, but the characters are flat. Because their sentence structures, like, their spelling is right and their grammar is fine. And I mean, I am definitely not somebody that knows where to put a comma, so I'm not even talking about that stuff. As like commas are the bane of everybody's existence, right?
Yep.
But when you're reading it, that author that you read and you don't even realize you're at the end of the book versus that author that you're reading it and it's like, it's good, but it's so hard to get through. What's that difference?
Yeah, it is the quality.
One captivated you with the way they wrote. So whether it's straight quality or just their style, it is important. And it's not going to call to everybody the same way, which is why we have so many different authors and genres. But you need to have a base level of quality or people are just going to throw it away after a chapter.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And I know also, I mean, obviously the difference between a book where you struggle to complete it and a book that's really easy and fun to read or it just pulls you all the way through kind of thing is a really good way of putting that. I like that a lot. So, yeah. So, but to go on with the reading thing, since we're getting toward the end of the show, what have you been reading lately? You have anything you can recommend to the listeners?
I actually have really fallen, I discovered a while back I was listening to a podcast about Overdrive and I was like, wait, I have a library card and I like free things. So I started getting some audiobooks from Overdrive because as much as I love listening to things, I really don't like paying for them because they're really expensive compared to like an ebook or a paperback. So I've been taking out of the library lately and I discovered someone named Jonathan Stroud.
Yeah, heard of him.
And I've never heard of him because like I don't get out much. But he writes YA, and the first book that I read of his was called The Screaming Staircase, and it almost feels like it's written in Victorian England, steampunk kind of style, but it's supposed to be like an alternative now. So I guess it would fit into the paranormal, and it's basically if everybody that died, their ghosts hung around. Right? So
that's a fascinating concept.
It's so cool. And I get scared easily, but I have not found this too scary. So it's definitely, I think, fits nicely into that YA. And the main characters are teenagers because the only people that can actually see the ghosts to fight them are children.
Okay. So, that's a whole twist that changes it quite a bit there.
Yeah, because like the adults are the bosses and in charge, except for at this agency, the Lockwood Agency, which is where our protagonists work. And they're basically, it's like this tiny ragtag group of teenagers and everybody looks down on them and they're kind of broke and they kind of suck. But of course, they're our heroes. So at the end, they're going to come out on top and It's just, I really, really enjoyed it. And because it was an audiobook format, I don't know if I would have enjoyed it so much had I read it for the simple reason that it kind of felt like I was listening to a campfire story. So it added that extra something to it.
Yeah. So, that sounds really cool.
Yeah, so I've now read the first 3 books this month. And I'm waiting, I think book 4 I'm waiting to get from the library. So as soon as I get that, then I'll be on that one. I definitely am enjoying those.
Nice. As for me, I've made progress in both the books I was reading, but I've been kind of slow. So I've been reading Casino Royale by Ian Fleming, the first James Bond novel. Yeah,
the original.
That one's the original, and it's full of little details. Honestly, mostly about gambling.
Yes.
So it's really fascinating, but it's also, and I really like it. It's very immersive in a way I did not expect. From a book of its time, of basically a pulp novel, I mean, it's late pulp novel, 50s, and it's not very long. I'm about halfway through it now because I'm again the slow, kind of lazy reader. That's one of the reasons I do this segment is I'm trying to get involved with the reading more again because I used to read a ton.
So,
now,
audiobooks are a good way to do that.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I can think about it. I actually like to look at the words. Honestly, I like to read like that.
I love looking at the words, but I don't have time to sit down anymore and just read most of the time because I'm usually editing or beta reading. So like I can exercise or drive or do housework while I listen to an audiobook.
That's a good point. I'll have to see about getting Overdrive because I have a library card too.
I love free, right? You cannot go wrong with free.
Yeah, I can't really afford Audible right now, but I could do Overdrive. You know,
I could totally do Overdrive. Absolutely. And you probably would have more selection than I do because I think it's sort of library dependent.
Yeah. That's what
I live in a small town, so.
Well, and it's funny though because you can share those codes. I remember at one time I was trying. One of my friends tried to share an Overdrive like from a different library somewhere else in the country. It was really kind of fun. It did work. Yeah.
Cool.
So if you get the right code and you know where to look, you can find even more books. But there you go. I mean, I'm not trying to tell people to cheat Overdrive, but it's just basically ordering your book away, and then you can use other people.
I may message a few Facebook friends from around the country.
Yeah, I mean, definitely consider that. So yeah, so thanks for being on the show, HM.
Well, thank you, and I've had a lot of fun.
Well, great. It's been a lot of fun having you. So. Tell people where they can find your work and where to find your books and stuff. Okay,
well, you can find me at my website, which is hmgoodenauthor.com, and I have a Facebook group called Summerland Gate, Gooden Summerland Gate, and I'm on Twitter. Most things I'm under HM Gooden, so I'm on Twitter and Instagram under that, and you can find my books pretty much everywhere. I am wide because I'm in Canada, and I just found that in order for my books to be available to my friends and family, I pretty much had to be wide. And I am in a few bookstores in Canada as well.
Nice. So as for this show, and everybody go check her stuff out. It looks very good. As for this show, you can find find more of this show at mentalcellarpublications.com if I can talk. And you can find more, and you can find my books at amazon.com, except of course you can find, in addition, of course, you can find the first book of Stormfleet of the Polar Universe series. You can find that for free anywhere fine ebooks are distributed. And you can also, and now by the time this is out, you can find my re-released dystopian novella, The Mangrove Suite, and that's free everywhere as well. So take a look take a look out there. Those are both great. I think The Mangrove Suite is one of my favorite things I've ever written. But Stormfleet gives it a run for its money. Definitely check those out if you're listening. All right, thanks everybody, and have a great week.
That tears it.